Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited for our author today. We are talking all things quirky, fun, and romance. And not to forget to mention sexy. We have the one and only Annabeth Albert. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you.
I have to comment again. I know I said it once, but I absolutely love these cat ears. They're so cute.
They've become kind of my trademark now because I've done so many of these lives and I go live in my reader group and stuff. And now I think people see me and they think the headphones are coming. So I kind of have to have them. So
Well, I want to get straight into it. Let's start talking about books. Why did you start writing? When and how did you publish?
okay, so I've been writing really long time, like since I was a kid. When I was a kid, like a lot of kids, I'd read whole series of books and then I'd be sad when the books ended. And at the time, I didn't know what fanfic was. Now that's kind of a whole big thing. But I'd write more stories in the universe, like more Anna Green Gables or more Little House or more Indian in the Cupboard, which is a series here in the US. And I would write more in that universe. And so I'd start like doing writing contests and stuff. And then I went off to college and graduate school, and I still love to write. And I was in graduate school, and my mom gave me a big sack of romance books because I loved romance. I was a big reader even then. And I read the romances, and I was like, I really want to try and write one. And that was back in 2003. And of course, like everyone, I thought, oh, I'll be published really soon. No, that took another 10 years. But in the interim, I wrote a lot of books that didn't go anywhere. And I tried a lot of different genres and tried different things. And then in 2014, I sold the book that would become Troublemaker. And that kind of launched me on this path, and I now have like 40. It just blows my mind. I've got like 40 books out, and it just boggles my mind that I get paid to do this. And so I love it. I love writing. I've always written. I've always had stories in my head, and so I really think I'm lucky that I get to do what I love.
That's amazing. So what did you do in those 10 years that you were writing books? Were you sort of pitching those manuscripts and they weren't being picked up, so then you were letting them rest to the side? Or did you ever think about indie publishing perhaps? Were you always
Not well, when I first started in 2003, the landscape was very different. It was still very traditional published based. I really liked the idea of being traditionally published. I liked the idea of being an editor, and it took me a while to kind of come to the indie publishing side, and now I love it. I love being hybrid. I love having my publishers and having my indie stuff. But at first I was definitely pursuing more the traditionally published, but also I was getting good feedback. I was in sort of writing groups and writing classes and RWA, which is the Romance Writers of America group, and I was taking all sorts of classes and workshops and stuff. And I knew my writing wasn't quite there yet. I think that's kind of a lot of beginning writers write one book and they think, okay, but it takes multiple books to get to where you're, for at least some people. For me, it took a bunch of tries before my skills were really ready. And I could tell as I was writing the book that became Troublemaker that something was different, that everything was kind of starting to come together, plotting and pacing and characters, and it was starting to really be something that could be publishable. And so with that one, and that was the one that sold. And so it's kind of interesting to kind of see your skills progress. And in those intervening like 10 years, I did have two kids, and life kind of got in there. But I'm really glad that I wrote those 8 or 9 books that never got published, because I think it made me a better writer once I was published.
Yeah, I find this so amazing too that you still had the resilience, I want to say, because as you said, a lot of authors these days will write one book and they think that's it. And they do get very disheartened when it doesn't go somewhere straight away. And I think that's really amazing that you were very aware that you're like, okay, we'll just keep building on my skill set, because that's what writing is. And you really home in on your craft. How was it for you? What was the experience when you pitched Troublemaker? What was that like when you did you acquire an agent first or go straight to
I got an agent. Sarah Zita Hernandez was my first agent, and she is fabulous. And I was so excited to get her. And what happened actually, it's the age of social media. She mentioned on Twitter that she had gotten my latest, the Troublemaker revisions and a coffee shop romance, which became Portland Heat. And she mentioned that she had a gay barista romance in on her desk from me. And my editor at Kensington at the time saw her tweet and said, I want to see this. And so he replied to her on Twitter, and she replied to me and said, how fast can you get these two things together so we can get a package to him? And we submitted it, and they took the Troublemaker series, Perfect Harmony, and the Portland Heat series. So it was it was so cool. I was really excited. And so from that point on, I was always kind of doing both a little bit of indie and the trad pub, because at the same time, while I'd been waiting to get published, I'd hooked up with a couple of anthologies and other indie pub things. And so I had that coming down the pike too. And it was just really a very exciting time. Those books were coming and these anthologies were coming out too. And it was a lot of excitement.
That's a lot. What did you do to celebrate?
I don't remember. I had really young kids at the time. We probably got Thai food or Indian or something takeout. But yeah, I was just so excited to finally get stories out there. And I think I haven't really lost that excitement, even though it's been like 7 years now. Just having readers is so awesome. Like just having people read the stories and like them, like that's just so exciting.
Yeah, and I find it so amazing. I love hearing stories like this too, when you did do the years, like you did the grind, so to speak. You didn't have that immediate satisfaction. You know, you received those rejection letters and then you went, okay, on to the next one, bigger and better, and you kept going through, and then look how successful you are for it. Like, it's amazing. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I think part of it, that resilience makes me a better writer now, because I got used to kind of hearing feedback like, oh, this needs to change or that. And I got used to kind of making those changes. So now when I work with my editors, both my indie editors and my traditional published editors, I'm able to kind of step back more from my work. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. This does need to change and this can be stronger and we can rearrange this and this. And so I'm able to kind of separate myself from it because, yeah, like you said, I went through a lot. I developed a pretty thick skin. You get rejection after rejection. And look at your work more objectively. Like, why is this not selling? Oh, wait, there's not really a plot. Or, oh, this character is such a Mary Sue. And so you start to kind of take apart your own work in ways that make you a better critic. And I got better at taking critique because I wanted to get better. And I was really fortunate that I read a lot of sort of inspirational stories, like Debbie McCumber had a really good one, and Nora Roberts' story. Like, these were people who wrote by the typewriter at their kitchen table, trying to get their romances published. And they just kept sending them in. And eventually they published. And so I had heard the Nora Roberts story and the Debbie McCumber story. And I was like, if I just keep at it, something will happen. And so perseverance really was the message I got from a lot of those early conferences and stuff that I went to. And I was just really fortunate to get to hear different people speak.
Yeah, that's such an important message. So speaking of like being passionate and celebrating, exciting news, you've had a recent release in like the last few days.
Yeah, Thursday.
How crazy is that? Can you, Hope on the Rocks, I believe it is. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So this is a book that's 4 years in the making, because in 2017, I brought out my Rainbow Cove series, which is set here in Oregon, on the Oregon coast, which is very idyllic. A lot of people like to vacation there. So I picked a little vacation town that I made up, and I populated it with 3 friends. And the 3 friends brought a bar to the area, and the 2 friends got their books really fast in 2017. And then the 3rd friend, his book just did not want to come. And so I had to move on to some other series because I just was not getting a handle on this book. But then in 2020, I kept coming back. I was like, I really want to end this series. I wanted to get new covers for the first two books. I wanted to kind of, and I was like, how can I do that? How can I bring this series to a close? Because everyone kept asking me, where's Adam's book? I was like, I too would like to know where Adam's book is. And so I kind of opened myself back up to the possibility of, well, what could this book be? And I realized that what I had been trying for several years to go after was not the right direction for that character. And once I realized that, the book just kind of came. And I wrote it this past spring, and it was one of my best writing experiences because the book just really wanted to be written. And so it came out on Thursday. It's a bartender. He's kind of a lumberjack, wears plaid, big burly guy, and he's paired with the local small town doctor. And so it's a male, and the two of them have a very steamy summer romance, and it was a lot of fun to write. It's low angst, it's fluffy, it has a big happy ending, and it was just so much fun. And so it came out on Thursday, and the response has been really wonderful. I'm just so excited to see readers connecting with it. And what's cool is readers are going back to the first three books in the series and getting caught up. And that's what I wanted to happen. I wanted to be able to bring the series together as a whole.
That's amazing. I find it so interesting when we have to take a step back. As writers, we have to take a step back when we know that something isn't working and we haven't yet figured out the piece of the puzzle, whatever it may be. And so we really have to take a step back. And then sometimes we do have to, go on to a different project or just leave it as it is until we figure that out. It's so interesting that you had such a year gap between it, and then you came back and in one season wrote the entire book.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how that happens. I had like probably 6 or 7 false starts in the years in between. Like I'd do a scene, I'd outline, not working. I'm a plotter, so I'd try and get an outline together, and it just wasn't feeling right. And I'd try and get a scene to start, and no. And then I was like, maybe it's the pairing, maybe it needs to be a different person. Tried that. No. And so, but I had other deadlines. I'd sold the Alaska series and the firefighter series in the meantime. And so I couldn't keep trying. I had to kind of slot it into where I had openings. But every time I'd get an opening, I'd be like, let's try Adam. Nope. But then when I tried it this spring, so it's just weird how that happens.
That's amazing. Speaking of plotting, how do you plot? What's your writing process?
So I wasn't always a plotter. I started out like a lot of people. I'm just going to write. I'm just going to see what happens. And that's where some of those early books just went totally off the rails. And so I realized that my mind works best when I can kind of organize it. And once I started thinking in terms of beats, like the romance structure, how things happen in a story, like kind of the Pixar storytelling thing, like people talk about that, like how movies have a 3-act structure and you have a climax. And once I started getting a handle on that structure, my books started coming together more. So I started trying to lay it out more like a movie with scene cards. And a lot of authors do this with the different scene cards. So one card for each scene. So I use a program called Scrivener, but I've also used just paper index cards too. And so I just start laying out cards, and I kind of know myself how many cards for how long of a book. Like a full-length book is usually around 40 scenes for me. So I'll just start plunking down cards, and I'll be like, okay, this is Act 1, this is Act 2A, this is Act 2B, this is Act 3, where are events going to start coming? And I just start putting information on the cards, where I think it'll go. I kind of open myself up. I like to think about what are my favorite things to write. So that's how I got over the hump with Adam. Was I started thinking, well, what do I really want to write? What would be really fun for him? And I was like, oh, I really want to send them camping. And so I got that in there. And so I put that on my cards, and I was like, oh, they're going to need to actually walk on the beach. Okay, let's put a walk in the beach. So I started kind of thinking, well, what things do I want to write that would be really fun for this character? And then I started kind of working out from those scenes and putting in other scenes. And once I have something on every card, then I usually start writing. But it can take me a couple of days to get everything laid laid out, start really thinking about the connections between things. How are the love scenes going to come in? How are the love scenes going to impact the overall plot? What's happening in the background, the secondary characters, the character growth. I'm really big on character growth. And so how are they growing? How are they changing? What scenes would really best reflect that change? And then I put that on the cards. And so once I get a lot of information on my scene cards, then I feel like I can start writing. I usually do a little more character work too. What do they want? What are they lacking? What kind of wound do they have in their past? Like what hurt them? What hurt them in the past? What do they need to heal from? Where do they need to grow? Because if they're perfect characters when we start, they don't really need the romance. So I like to say, what are they lacking? What is the romance going to bring to their life that they don't have right now? And so I kind of think about that, and I get that information too, usually on a separate piece of paper. And I kind of go deep in here. What do they like? Why do they like what they like? Like if they like country music, why? Did someone in their past like that kind of music? They like spicy food. Why? Like the why is so important. So I'll spend some time like thinking about their favorite things and why those are their favorite things. And that kind of influences it. And then I just start trying the first scene. I see how it feels. And like with Adam, sometimes the first scene just isn't feeling it. Other times the first scene just flows and I'm off to the races. Sometimes it's, oh, this point of view, I'm opening in the wrong spot. I need to have the other character's point of view open. Sometimes it's, oh, I tried third person. It really probably wants to come as first or vice versa. So I'm real, that opening scene, I write pretty slow because I'm sort of testing things. How does this feel? How is this going to fit? Is this the right voice? And once the voice is there, then I write the rest of the book pretty linear and I just follow those scene cards.
That's amazing. That's such a thorough structure as well. And I imagine like it helps you too in the long run as well, like for authors, particularly who are pantsers, guilty, because you sometimes lose sight of where you're at in the story, especially if it's a chunkier book. And having that outlay right there really enables you to visualize the storyline quite literally. That's a really good process.
Yeah, it really does. Like right now I'm writing my Christmas story and I have 10 scenes to go. So I know what has to happen in that last chunk. I know where I am. I'm right at the point that they're having some doubts and there's going to need to be a period of character growth. Well, I've only got 10 scenes left, so we better start growing like now. So because I have that outline, I can also see where we've been. Like that's important too. It's not just where you need to go with the story, but where have you been? What happened these other 30 cards? And so having that all in front of me, I can sort of see, has the change been happening? Do I need to go back and fix something? And if the change has been happening, where are we in terms of the romance and what is left to go? And so it helps me to predict my word count too. Sometimes writers get surprised. They set out to write a 20,000 word novella and they write a 100,000 word novel instead. When you lay out your whole structure, that doesn't happen as much because you kind of know how much you have left. Like I can kind of guess that I've got about 10,000 to 12,000 words left. And so I'll be somewhat within sort of what I predicted for my end length. And that helps starting out too, because if I got 10,000 words in and I'm not to like where I thought I'd be, I look and I see what's happening. Are these scenes taking longer? Did I add some stuff in that I wasn't intending? How's that going to impact the rest of the book? Are we going to get longer? Like I can sort of see the big picture, and I really like being able to do that.
That's amazing. One storyline that really grabbed my attention was Conventionally Yours. I absolutely loved the cover to that. And then I read the blurb and it sounds like such a fun read. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that one?
Okay, so Conventionally Yours and Out of Character, which is the book behind me here. Those are my new adult YA sort of crossover romances. They're right out of college. They're really fun because they're at that time in their life when they're trying new things. They're discovering who they are as people. And I love writing that fresh out of college age. It's just really fun. And so Conventionally Yours has two guys who play a card game like Magic the Gathering, but it's not Magic the Gathering. But so they play a card game and they're rivals. They don't really like each other, but they end up on a road trip together to a big convention. And so this came out last year when nobody was taking road trips and there were no conventions. And it was really fun for me to get to talk about conventions and road trips and travel at a time when we weren't really getting to do that. So it's really kind of my love letter to everything that my geeky heart loves about board games and card games and fandom and what happens when you find your people who share your fandom, like going to the conventions and stuff. So that was really fun. And it's a rivals to lovers romance. We even have an only one bed moment. It's really fun. And then the sequel is Out of Character, and that came out this summer, and that stars one of the friends from Conventionally Yours. He gets his romance with a childhood friend who turned enemy, back to friend, something more, and they have to work together. So I really liked writing both of these books. And so they're both just really fun. They're very light. They're sort of rom-com in feel. They feel kind of like, you know, a rom-com movie. They move along pretty fast. It's very focused on the couple, and it's just really fun.
I'm so excited to read that. It sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, both of those were really fun. Fans have been responding to it really fun. And what's interesting to me is people across a lot of different age groups are reading it. Like upper teens are reading it and they're saying, oh, I want to do this after college. And older people are reading it and saying, oh, I loved them. It was so fun to get to be that age again in my head and so a wide variety of readers are finding those two books, and it's really interesting to me. And even some people are reading it, like some people in their 40s are reading it with their teen kids, and the teens are reading it and giving the book to their parents. And so it's really cool. The cross-generational readership for this series has been really fun. And in terms of heat level, those two books are a little lower in the heat level than some of my more adult books, but I think they are also really fun. And so they bring that fun feel, and they're really approachable, and the heat is not quite as steamy, but there's still a lot of connection and a really big, fluffy, happy ending. And they're really satisfying to write too, because it's just, they're falling in love for the first time, and it's just fun.
That's so cute. I want to actually talk about genre writing because you write numerous genres, but I do want to talk about writing LGBTQ because that is a reader favorite of yours.
That's pretty much all I do is LGBTQ. So yeah.
What drew you to writing this particular genre, and what advice would you have for authors who are writing their first book?
So that's a really good question. So I was drawn to this first as a reader. I noticed that authors like Suzanne Brockman were writing LGBTQ subplots, and I loved the subplots. And then in 2011, I read my first LGBTQ romance, which was Marie Sexton's Promises. And from that moment on, I started reading everything I could. And I didn't even understand why at that point. I hadn't come out as bisexual. I was still figuring a lot of stuff out about myself, even though I was well over 30. But I was still figuring a lot of stuff out, but I just loved it. And like we said earlier, I'd written a number of books up until that point, but none had sold. And having read several male-male pairings, I was open. I was starting to think about, well, maybe my next will be. And there was a singing show here in the US, one of those music competitions. You guys probably have them, like The Voice. And so there was a singing competition, and I'm watching the singing stuff on TV. And I started thinking, what if there were two guys and they were rivals and they both wanted to win for different reasons and they had to work together? And then that became Troublemaker. That became the book that sold. And writing it just felt so right. Nothing had felt that good up until then. So then I wrote the rest of that series, which were all male. And then I just kind of kept going in the genre. And the more I wrote, the more I learned about myself. I felt confident enough to finally come out as bisexual. I learned a lot about sort of how gender works in my head. And I felt at home in the genre. And I think that a lot of writers can write different things. So I don't think you should feel like you have to be LGBTQ to write. So if you have a series, like a male-female series, and there's a side character who really wants a boyfriend, give him a boyfriend. Or there's a side character who's a female who's looking for that perfect woman. Absolutely. I think the key is that it come from a place of respect and authenticity and what's true for that character. And I always start with character. What does this character want? Why is this character in an LGBTQ pairing? Why did they come out? What do they need? You want it to be a deep level of character, not just, oh, it would be fun to stick two characters together and see what happens, but that character needs to need the other person, regardless of the gender. And if you can start from character, everything else will flow. And so that would be my number one piece of advice, would be find the authenticity in the character. If you've never written LGBTQ before, make sure that you read pretty widely in the pairings you're hoping to do, whether it's male-male, female-female, non-binary, whatever you're thinking of writing, read a lot like that. Get beta readers and critique partners who have either written or who read a lot of those pairings. And if you're writing a gender or a sexuality that you really don't know that well, get a sensitivity reader who shares that marginalization. And so when I wrote my first asexual character who was on the asexual spectrum, and it was a demisexual character, and I was like, that's not really me. So I got several readers who were on the ace spectrum to read that book so that I got the feedback from them, because I wanted it to come from a place of respect and a place of authenticity. And so getting the sensitivity reader was important. So for other people, like if you've never written a male-male, you might get a gay male reader or somebody to take a look at the manuscript just to see how it's feeling, the authenticity, the respect level. Is the representation good? You don't want to accidentally do a harmful stereotype. And so but if you come at it from what is appropriate for this character, and you have your team of readers and people helping you out, I think you can. I think a lot of people start to get really nervous. Well, I've only written male, female. If the spirit moves you and this character needs that pairing, then absolutely write it. And I hope in the future to get to write more different pairings, non-binary, female, female. I think there's a whole big, beautiful rainbow. And a lot of times we focus in on that male-male pairing or the female-female or the male-female. There's so much possibility. And so I like kind of thinking broadly, and I really encourage other writers to think like that too, as the whole rainbow, not just one little color.
Yeah, that's such amazing advice. And what I love too is that, and I've often said this on here as well, is that like writing for us is therapeutic as well, because we do discover a lot about ourselves in our writing as well. And also you do eventually slot into the niche that works for you, where your muse really flows. You know, we can write beautifully, but you really feel the difference when you find your muse, your place, like this is what I like to write. And I find that really, really magical. 2021 has been a huge year for you. You've released so many books so far. And I want to know, are you Superwoman? But two, I also am curious what advice you would offer for authors who want to maintain a consistent release schedule without burning out. What advice would you have?
I think consistency is the key there. I think so. I will have had 7 releases when 2021 is done. I didn't set out to do that. And if you would have told me in March of 2020 that I'd accomplish it, I would have, because when the pandemic started, it was like, wow, my writing took a huge hit. March of 2020. I barely wrote. I was like, how am I going to do this? And at that point, I'd written like 30 books. It was like, why have you forgotten how to write, Annabeth? But it was consistency that brought me back. And so when writers are struggling with burnout, I come back every time to giving the advice of consistency. And I don't mean sit down and write 5,000 words a day. That's not the kind of consistency I mean. What I mean is making an effort the days that are feasible for you. And for some people who have a full-time job, that might mean that they're only writing on weekends. That's what's reasonable for them. Other people, maybe it's a daily schedule, maybe it's taking Mondays and Fridays off, whatever is feasible for you on those days, writing needs to be the priority. And that means maybe the housework waits. Maybe the TV doesn't get watched that day. Maybe, you push your workout back because you have to make it a priority consistently. And the other thing is you got to be realistic with your goal setting. If you have never written 5,000 words a day, committing to writing 5,000 is probably not going to go that great for you. But if you have written 1,000 words a day a number of times, that's a realistic goal. How can I get to 1,000 most days of the week? And how can I keep at it? And so that's what I'm really looking at as a writer. It's not how can I achieve these word counts that everyone else is getting, but how can I be realistic for me, an amount that I can get and do it fairly often. And so I do a lot of what I call micro sprints, which is I don't say I'm going to write 2,000 words today. I say I'm going to write for 15 minutes. And I'm going to try for 6 15-minute sprints. And during those 15 minutes, I'm not going to check the internet. I'm not going to check my email. If the phone buzzes, I'm not going to look at it. I'm just going to write for 15 minutes and I'm going to see what happens. And I do that 6 times. And amazingly, the words start adding up. That's the beauty of micro sprints and also consistency. So most days of the week, I'm trying for 6 little sprints. I'm going to start racking up the words. And so when you want a consistent release schedule, you want to be writing like that, but not in a way that's going to burn you out. Like I said, if you've never written 10,000 words in a weekend, don't try, but do what's realistic for you and use programs like Pacemaker and Scrivener and the NaNoWriMo program to lay out your work because it's a marathon. It's not we're going to write the book in a weekend. It's how can I meet my goal? And so if my goal right now is a Christmas release. I know that the release is going to be November before the holidays get going. And so for months now, I've kind of known when the first draft would be due, when the edits will go. And so having deadlines helps you to have kind of goalposts to write towards. And kind of like we're talking about the structure of the book, I have the structure of the writing itself. And so I know like mid-July, I'd really like to be halfway through this book. And if I'm not, maybe I need to start speeding up now rather than wait till 3 days before the deadline and realize I'm 30,000 words short. I kind of look at the pacing as I'm going. Am I on pace? Do I need to speed up a tiny bit? Am I ahead of pace? And then I can kind of give myself more self-care and kind of, so you can really kind of look at it as a marathon and spread it out, pace it. Consistency really is the key though, because like I said, I didn't set out to write 7 books for 2021. And a lot of the books were actually banked during 2020. And so but if you're writing consistently, the books will add up, and just have a good process for I write, I edit, I send it off for proofs, it comes back, I edit again. Like, what is your process? And then you're getting the books out and then you're on to the next. And always kind of be on to the next. Like, I think long gaps are kind of what a lot of people struggle with. So I'm usually thinking like right now, I know what I'll start in September. I've kind of got that cogitating, and that then will take me into 2022 because I kind of know what the next couple of projects are.
so in love with you. You give such good advice. Do you do like workshops and panels?
Yeah, so I am very fortunate that I have gotten to speak on a couple of different workshops. I love talking plotting. That is my favorite thing. If you have, and I'll do it anywhere in the world, like with the Zoom. I love doing writer groups. If anyone is watching this and you have a writer group that you'd like me to come talk plotting, I love talking plotting. That's probably my favorite thing to do workshops on, is the plotting. But because I think that so much stems from that structure. And if you can get in a rhythm with the structure of the book, then the structure of finishing the book, like I said, that starts to become easier. Everything kind of becomes easier when you have a good pattern of organization for the writing itself. And so I'm really passionate about that, and about characters and character growth. And I love talking about it. And I've gotten to do some book clubs too, like with readers. And it's always interesting, the difference between talking to writers and talking to readers. And with writers, you're like, oh, it took me 6 months to wrestle this book into place. And then you talk to readers and they're like, oh, I read this and I stayed up till 3 a.m. and it took me a whole 4 hours to read. It's like, wow. And so for them, it happens in the blink of an eye. For us, and that's why, like, we talk behind the scenes, we're wrestling for months and months on this character issue. And for the reader, it's like a movie. They just experienced it as an organic whole, the way you were intending it to be. And so I love both those experiences, talking to readers and talking to writers, and kind of seeing the whole process.
I have a question then for you about tropes. And I think that they're more important than perhaps some authors realize. And you even have on your website, you've segregated your books via...
Yeah, you can search by trope now.
Which is amazing. Why? And I'm curious, are you already aware before you write a book, do you know what tropes you're targeting, or do you write the book and then basically figure out the tropes as you go? And why do you think it's so important for us to separate them?
When I first started, I'd write a book and then I'd figure out where it fit. Those books were really hard to sell because, and I don't just mean sell to an editor, I mean sell to readers, because I didn't know what the trope was. So it was really hard to do what they call that elevator pitch, where you really should be able to summarize your book in about 50 words. And if you don't know what the tropes are, you're not going to be able to get that good, fast pitch for the book. And I think a lot of people think, well, I don't want to write tropes. I don't want to be so predictable. Tropes are not about being predictable. Tropes are about knowing where your book fits and how to reach the readers for whom those elements are kind of catnip. So now I start with the tropes, like for the book that's coming in September, Sailor Proof. I knew I wanted to write a new military romance because my readers were dying for me to write more military, and because I'd done a pretty successful military series in the past. So they wanted more military. But then I started thinking, okay, what are my favorite tropes to read that my readers will enjoy, that I'd like to write? And so I started thinking, okay, I definitely want it to be brother's best friend. That's like one of my favorite tropes. I want them to have to work together. Oh, maybe we could do fake relationships. So I start stacking tropes together. So it's a brother's best friend, fake relationship, and they're having to make it work at a family gathering, so close proximity. And so I got like a bunch of my favorite things all together. And that's the uniqueness. That's where it sort of goes away from predictability, is when you have the combinations. And like my Christmas one, I knew I wanted to do neighbors to lovers. I wanted them to live next door. I knew I wanted Grumpy Sunshine because that just is such a fun holiday pairing. One grumpy, one sunshine. And so I kind of looked for those tropes that would be really fun to write. And I knew I wanted snow, and I knew I wanted kind of found family. And so knowing what tropes then helps me with those scene cards, because, okay, it's a brother's best friend book. what is going to need to happen? Well, the brother is going to need some scenes. That's going to happen, right? What else is going to happen? Oh, the brother is going to have to get a little unhappy with what things are doing. I better put that on the scene card, because we expect that from a brother's best friend romance. We expect that tension. And if we never see that tension play out, well, then we're not as satisfied. So once I know the trope, I actually start to know kind of some things that are going to happen, like Grumpy and Sunshine. Well, one guy better be talking the other into something that he would rather not do, something big and fun and poofy, and the other guy has no interest in it. So I knew I needed that. And so you start to kind of think about what's it gonna need. And like with Conventionally Yours, I knew I wanted to write a road trip. I love road trips. I really wanted to write a road trip romance. And I was like, okay, they're gonna have to get bad road trip food. They're going to have car trouble. They're going to have only one bed at one of the stops, because that's the whole fun of a road trip. And so like I started to think of the things that it would need, because I knew what made a really satisfying thing for me. And so that's where starting from the trope can really help you. And it's the things that speak to you that makes it unique. Like I love road trips with only one bed. Someone else might love a road trip that's very music centered and the playlist, and they're arguing over the radio the whole time. And so their road trip book is going to be completely different from my road trip book. And so that's where tropes are a lot more freeing than people think, because people are like, well, I don't want to write just a friends to lovers because that's so predictable. No, your friends are different than my friends. And the things that speak to you are going to be different. But if you can write to those predictable beats, that's really interesting.
So speaking of elevating pitches, which is everyone's favorite thing to do, what can you give us sort of a step-by-step process, as to how you acquired your agent and what the next steps were to getting a publisher, to getting an editor, and what advice you would have for those who are just starting out, or maybe they've been doing it for a while, but they're trying to pitch? What advice would you have for them?
So I would say, first off, you need to think about writing organizations. Like in Australia, you have the great Australian romance writers. You guys have a really nice Australian organization. So those writing organizations and the conferences, and look within your state, or I think you guys call them provinces, like your area, like local conferences, those are really worth their weight in gold. Because if you can go to a smaller conference and get sort of confidence in pitching, the bigger opportunities will feel easier. So I think, getting involved in local writing organizations is really good. The other thing too is kind of know what your objective is. Because right now there's so many options available to writers. If what you really want is your books to be available to as many people as possible, you love the idea of ebooks, you're mainly an ebook reader yourself, you want to reach as many people as possible, and you love being in control, you want to pick your covers, you want to pick your editor, then you are a perfect fit for indie publishing. So for you, maybe the editor agent pathway is not as important. You still need to be able to pitch because you need to get readers to read your book, but you're going to be more focused on the indie pub pathway. Other people, maybe they really want their book in bookstores. They want to hold the paper book, and that's important to them. And maybe like me, like they're not control freaks. They like the idea of having a team, other people having input on the cover and having more editors. And they like that team-based approach. And they like sort of what traditional publishing can bring to the table in terms of bookstores and exposure that way. And so it's really important to know your goals. And like for some people, you might have both. Like I love the indie pub side. I also like the traditional publish. And so it's important to kind of know why you're falling different places. And so when you know your goals, then you just work on it like any other skill. Look at the back cover copy of books that you love. How are they pitching the book? How could you pitch your project similar to these things that you love? How do movies pitch that are similar to your book? And so you work the muscle and you write a bunch of queries, do your research. Don't just any old agent, look for agents that fit what you do. If you know from the get-go that you want to be hybrid and do both indie and traditional published, which a lot of authors do know that, make sure that the agents know that about you up front so that you're getting a good fit, so that they can support your indie pub and your indie pub can support your traditional published, and you can have a really nice marriage of those two sides of yourself. So I think, yeah, it really comes down to knowing yourself, knowing what your goals are, and then just working on it like any other skill. Just the more pitches you write, the more query letters, the more you talk to people, the easier it will get.
Yep. And have you remained with the same agent throughout your throughout your traditional route, should I say?
No, and I think that's pretty common to move. And I have a very good relationship with everyone that I've worked with, but you move from publisher to publisher at different points in your career. You may need something different in terms of an agent. A better fit may come along. And I've been super fortunate. Everyone I have worked with has been lovely. My career has taken me through several different publishers now and a couple of agents. And I'm very fortunate to have gotten to work with those people because it was the right person at the right time. And it's an evolution.
Yeah, and I think that's an important message too, because as you were saying, we obviously have our goals, and then in years, the more years you do it, should I say, sometimes they shift slightly, and then sometimes you do need different people, you need a different team surrounding you, and it is, as you said, it is quite common. So I think that's a good understanding when you're stepping into it as well, to have that. There's many different doors to take. If you have an objective on just one thing, just remember there might be numerous ways to get there.
Well, it's a job. I think if you think of it like a job, no, it's very rare anymore to have one job from the get-go till you retire. This is similar. You are probably going to have a couple of different agents at different points, meeting different places where you are. You're probably going to have multiple publishers. And even if you're indie, your process, your team is going to evolve. The editor you needed for book 1 is not going to be the editor you need for book 25. And so things will change regardless of your publishing. And if you think of it as a long career span, I think you'll be more able to roll with those changes.
Yeah. What has been your most memorable reader interaction?
Well, I've been fortunate to get to go to a couple of conventions, and conventions are always so fun to get to meet readers. And I had one reader who brought me a whole stack of my books and wanted them all signed. And it was such a surreal moment because I was so used to being on the other side of the table, to being that reader with the stack of books and being like coming up to my favorite authors. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm someone's favorite author. I'm auto buy for her. Like, it was just such a neat moment of coming full circle in my life, because I've been the reader, I've been the fangirl, and so to be on the other side of that was really humbling too. I felt really special, and I really appreciated that the reader did that I got to be that person for that reader was really important to me.
Because you have, you're very interactive with your readers, especially in your Facebook reader group. I think you have over, is it 3,000?
Yeah, we've got about 3,100 now, and that's really fun. It's a great space. I really like Facebook for that.
That's absolutely amazing. Congratulations. So what would your top 3 marketing tips be? And I guess, maybe even the reader interaction could be one. It's not really a marketing tip, but it's just making sure you're staying consistent with that engagement. But what would your top 3 marketing tips be for fellow authors that are listening?
Read. You need to be reading in your genre. If you want to be able to market your books, this kind of comes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about tropes. You need to know where your book fits. And if you're not reading, you're not going to know that. If you know that author A, B, and C all do books pretty similar to mine, then I know to look at their blurbs and their covers and what they're doing. And how am I doing similar to them? How am I reaching that same subset of readers? And so that's really important to me, is to sort of read and read widely and read not just the authors that are closest to me, but also other genres, because so maybe something interesting is happening in historical and they're doing some interesting marketing. So the more you read and the more you know where your book fits and what's working for other people and what works for you as a reader, you'll know how to reach the readers. So you absolutely, in my opinion, have to be a reader. And so that's number one. The second tip I would say is to be authentic. Because if you try and be something you're not, you're going to be miserable. And so, and that really applies to sort of the different strategies. Like a few months ago, everyone was talking about TikTok. And so I was talking to my friends and I said, I'm going to get on TikTok. And then I realized that I do not have a TikTok personality. It was not a good fit for me at this point for who I am. I felt really inauthentic. It didn't make me feel good. So for me, that's not a good marketing strategy. But Facebook, I feel really good. I love my reader group. I love that interaction. I like making the graphics for my reader group. That's a good fit. So being authentic and knowing what's a good fit for you, that's really key, I think, for a lot of people, is sort of knowing what's a good fit for you, what feels authentic, be authentic, but also, and this is my third tip, be professional and start out the way you mean to go on. So maybe this is your first book and this has been your personal Facebook for a while and you're used to kind of just letting it all hang out. Think about where you're going to be with book 20. Are you going to want to show pictures of your kids? Maybe you will, and that's awesome. Keep doing it. But if you 20 books down the road is not going to want to be talking about your relationship woes or your kids, start now being the kind of professional that you envision down the road so that those habits are already there and so that your professional persona precedes you. And I think that really applies to interactions with other authors too. From the get-go, if you're treating them as peers and treating them respectfully and not acting in ways that are not professional, you're going to have a much easier time marketing going forward than if you start in ways that are less professional, maybe more casual. A lot of writers starting out find it a little hard because they were readers and they were reviewing and they were doing all these things. And well, if you want to be the author now it's time to be author self. If you're 3-starring your fellow authors' books and 2-starring, is that the most professional thing that you could do as an author? So that's where you have to kind of ask yourself, is this right for my author self, the authenticity part? And also, is it the most professional? And is it something I want to be doing 20 books from now? I think those are the really important questions to be asking yourself.
Yeah, those are amazing tips. This is my favorite question to ask. What is the goal you're after? What is the dream that you're chasing for your writing career?
I get to live it right now. I think I'm it. For me, I have people who read my books. People can go to bookstores and they can get my book if they want. And people can read my ebooks anytime, day or night, around the world. I have people in India and Australia and New Zealand who are reading me. Like, this is the dream. This is pretty much the dream for me. I obviously, everyone says they want to be able to do it full time. They want to be able to, provide for their family in the future. And those are all great goals. But in terms of professional satisfaction, I'm getting it. And that's really awesome. And so, yeah, this kind of is the goal. But of course, you want to tweak, you want more readers, you want more of this. But I also try and say, hey, this is pretty cool just to be right here.
That's so awesome. Okay, I have a segment. It's called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a very romantic date. I lit a candle. I created an ambience. But it's basically 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Oh, I've had so many clumsy moments, but probably at a convention, I tripped getting behind things and it was not good. But squeezing behind a table, like yeah, I've had all sorts of clumsy moments, but I have definitely had and there was another author who was a really big name author, and I'm like trying to squeeze in, yeah, clumsy.
I hate the edges of the tables when you're trying to squeeze in. I always take out my legs. Like I end up with
I take out other people's things, like things on the table and stuff. And so yeah, I'm naturally clumsy, and I'm even more clumsy when I'm around people and I'm nervous. And so yeah.
What are the 3 best words that would describe you?
The 3 best words, probably driven, reader, because like I said, like everything stems from being a reader from childhood on. So, and I like to think that I'm a family first person, so probably family. So yeah, driven, reader, family.
Perfect. What song best describes you?
Oh, there's so many good songs. I should have looked ahead. I think every book that I do gets a different song. And the song that has come up the most on my playlist over the course of 40 some books is Say Something, the Pentatonics cover. And the reason for that, I think, is because communication is so key to everything that I write. And so the Say Something song, what it's really saying to me is these 2 people, these characters need to talk. And that kind of is sort of my guiding principle as a person too, is if we have a problem, we should talk it out. And so that song really, it's not like my theme song, but it means a lot to my writing. So I'd say that that song is pretty high up there.
What is your life motto?
My life motto: you only get to do it once.
What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not many people know about?
Oh, I'm pretty open about, like I knit, like everyone knows that I knit, and I do Legos and I do games and stuff, and I'm pretty good at the board games. And I cook. Like I'm trying to think of something that I'm not as, I am good at like organizing like other people's things. Like my own house, not so much, but other people like doing someone else's bookshelves or something, like that's really fun. I'm really good at coming up with plans for other people. So that's kind of my hidden talent. And that applies to plotting too. Like when my friends are plotting books, I love that. I love coming up with things for other people to do.
I feel like a lot of people do that though. Like when it comes to themselves, they're like, I'll do it tomorrow, but it's almost more exciting when you get to do it for somebody else.
I know, like my friend is plotting a new book series, and I am more invested in her book series than my book series, which I love my books, but hers are exciting because I don't have to write them. I can just tell her this, this, and this, and then I don't have to be the one to write them. I'm going to get to read them, and that's awesome. And so that's like, to me, that's really, and it's the same thing when you go to a friend's house and you help them clean. You don't have to be there when it gets messy. So it can be really fun to organize someone else's bookshelf or their closet because you don't have to make it work every day. And so that's, it's both a talent and also kind of a curse. But I think you're right that a lot of people have that. It's just, it's easier to do for others than to do for ourselves.
I have had so much fun. What books are coming up? Where do we find you? Where do we stalk you? What do we need to know?
So I'm all over social media. Come find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you are. I am too. I love hearing from readers. If you read one of my books or something, tag me on whatever social you use. I love hearing that readers are reading me. My reader group on Facebook is very active. We love having people. It's called Annabeths Angels. And if you find us, come see us. Love hearing about it. Coming up, I have, so Hope on the Rocks is out right now. Very steamy summer romance. I have a military romance coming in September, Sailor Proof. It's a brother's best friend military romance with 2 guys in the Navy, and I think you will really like it. And then I have a holiday romance that's Neighbors to Lovers and Grumpy Sunshine. That's coming in November. And then brand new stuff will come in 2022. So that's kind of what's coming down the pike for me. I love hearing from readers. I love doing things like this. If you watch us and you want to tell us in the comments, I do read the comments, and I love hearing from people. So yeah, seek me out on whatever your favorite social media is.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm gonna start. Well, I'm already stalking you, and I'm already in your reader group. So
Yay!
I will put the links below, especially for the recent releases. And thank you so much for coming on today. I've had a blast.
This was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
And who knows, maybe in the next year or so, I might get you back on and see what magic you've created since.
Yay!
All right, I'll talk to you later, Annabeth. Bye.
Bye-bye.